What if half the population of Earth was wiped out? Imagine, in a single, earth-shattering moment, half the people on our planet simply vanished. 8 billion people once filled this world. Families, friends, colleagues, strangers sharing sidewalks and cities, fields and forests. And then, 4 billion are gone. The implications would be immediate, profound, and overwhelming, echoing across every aspect of human life and the world itself. The first moments after such a loss would be indescribably chaotic. Streets and highways, once choked with traffic, fall almost silent, yet littered with abandoned vehicles where drivers vanished instantly. Planes, suddenly pilotless, fall from the sky. Trains coast to halts, and in many places, infrastructure grinds abruptly to a stop. Across the globe, startled survivors grapple with their unheard-of loss, struggling to make sense of empty homes, missing loved ones, and a world turned upside down in the blink of an eye. Hospitals would be scenes of confusion and despair, wards with half the beds empty, operating rooms and intensive care units suddenly abandoned mid-procedure, medics and support staff gone with no warning. In some places, the remaining medical staff would be overwhelmed not with numbers, but with the logistics of loss and grief. Everywhere, people would be looking for others, trying to call, reaching only dead phones, texts unanswered. But the effects would reach much further than the missing people right in front of us. In factories, power plants, water treatment centers, countless critical facilities, the skilled operators keeping them running may have vanished. Essential services, already delicate, could falter quickly. In the hours and days following, electricity may fail, water supplies may become unreliable, food deliveries may slow, and communication systems could stumble from lack of technicians. As night falls on the first day, the psychological impact grows. Survivors would be facing not just the absence of friends, family, and colleagues, but entire social structures, even their own sense of safety. Grieving would come in tidal waves, mixed with fear, uncertainty, and guilt. Some would be alone for the first time. Others would be crowded with fellow survivors, forming groups for security, warmth, and comfort. In the cities, formerly teeming with life, the absence would be stark and eerie. The hum of activity reduces to a quiet, broken only by the sounds of the natural world, reclaiming a measure of dominance. In rural areas and small towns, the loss would be less visually dramatic, but the impact, perhaps even more acute, as skeletal populations struggle to maintain community functions. Within days, the impact on infrastructure and organization becomes more marked. Public transportation systems, already short-staffed, largely cease operation. Trash collection, postal deliveries, and public services grind to a halt. Communication networks falter as fewer maintain the complex machinery. Economically, the shock would be staggering. Half of every workforce, gone. Entire industries, their key experts now missing, might collapse. Businesses of every size face not just labor shortages, but catastrophic loss of customers and supply chain partners. Stock markets plunge, their value meaningless as the priorities of the survivors shift overnight from growth and consumption to basic needs and security. Supply chains, already fragile, would break. Products, food, medicine, oil, manufactured goods, stop moving. Emergency services, police, fire, ambulance, would be stretched beyond breaking, with whole teams lost, response times lengthened, coordination confused by loss. Many remaining workers would be paralyzed by grief, unable to function for days or weeks. Governments, at every level, would struggle to function. Leadership positions, mayors, presidents, legislators, defense officials, would be decimated. Continuity of government plans would be tested to their limits, and new emergency systems would emerge, imperfect and makeshift. International relations would be transformed as states reorient inward, consumed with stabilizing their own societies. Law and order might falter. In some places, survivors cooperate, band together, and begin the monumental task of recovery. In others, without adequate governance, lawlessness and chaos take hold. Raiding, looting, and desperate acts characterize the early chaos, as people scramble for essentials and struggle with fear and uncertainty. The world's military forces, their ranks halved, could have difficulty maintaining security, let alone projecting power. Yet, even amid all this turmoil, new connections are formed. The survivors, united in shared trauma, forge bonds, reach out to strangers, and help each other. In some communities, grassroots organization and mutual aid take over, with people forming ad hoc councils and groups to address pressing needs. Out of disaster, a new tapestry of society begins to emerge. Religions, philosophies, and spiritualities would grapple with new questions. Many would see the event as a test, a punishment, or a sign, seeking answers in old beliefs and new revelations. Rituals of mourning would span weeks and months, with ceremonies adapting to mass loss. Memorials would rise, both personal and shared. The urban-rural divide might grow. City populations suddenly thinned, yet still possessing vast infrastructure. In the countryside, where populations are smaller and more scattered, communities function as isolated islands, sometimes cut off until new networks form. Food production would shift. With half of the farmers, workers, and logistics personnel missing, agricultural cycles are interrupted. Livestock go untended, fields unharvested. Supermarkets soon empty, and remaining supply chain personnel are overwhelmed. Amid this, survivors would look back to more basic means: community gardens, local farming, and bartering. New self-sufficiency, born of necessity, redefines economies. As days turn to weeks, survivors adapt. They reconfigure homes, workplaces, and neighborhoods for the new reality. People move, some leaving empty cities, drawn to smaller towns. Others seeking larger communities for comfort and survival. Whole industries revive in miniature, and new leaders emerge, often from unexpected corners. Teacherless schools resume, sometimes as community centers for children and adults alike, places to eat, learn, and comfort. The environment, oddly, benefits. With less activity, pollution drops rapidly. Carbon emissions fall, the air clears. With fewer cars, trucks, and planes, skies are less noisy, cities quieter, and urban wildlife ventures into empty streets. Nature reasserts itself even in the most densely populated places, offering survivors moments of wonder amid tragedy. In time, governments reform, if not as before, then in new, leaner forms. Countries that weather the crisis best do so through collaboration, flexibility, and the building of new social compacts. City-states and smaller collectives may even gain in prominence, as local organization often proves most effective in a world of broken supply chains and communications. Borders become more porous in some places and more rigid in others. Countries with relatively few survivors may invite immigration to rebuild, while others clamp down to manage limited resources. International organizations struggle to adapt, focusing less on grand proposals and more on sharing vital information, like disease outbreaks, food production techniques, and disaster relief. Global cooperation, shaken but not shattered, slowly resumes. Science and technology face great challenges. Massive losses of expertise set back research everywhere. Critical projects are abandoned, and vital data may be lost forever depending on which specialists remain. Yet, among survivors, a spirit of innovation takes root as they seek to address urgent problems with limited resources. Makeshift tools and clever hacks become the new normal. And over time, networks of survivors restore the lifelines of communication, energy, and transport. Religious and cultural traditions shift along with the demographics of survivors. Some cultures suffer disproportionately. The loss of whole regional languages, customs, or art forms is possible. Yet, resilience abounds. People cherish what remains, passing on stories, traditions, and skills to new generations, adapting rituals to new realities. In the absence of mass consumerism, priorities shift. Less emphasis on luxury goods, more on food, shelter, medicine, basic technology. Specialization narrows, but collaboration is deepened. People learn to do more with less, and to rely on their immediate communities rather than faraway networks. The psychological toll is immense. survivors contend not just with the loss of individuals, but of identity and meaning. Some develop post-traumatic growth, strengthened by the adversity. Others struggle with survivor's guilt, depression, or anxiety. Mental health becomes a focus, with communities experimenting widely with group support, ritual, and creative expression as ways to heal. Educational systems are remade. With many teachers lost and children orphaned, education becomes community-driven. Survivors pass on practical skills before academic theory, and schools, when they revive, emphasize resiliency, adaptability, and critical thinking over rote learning. Curiosity endures, but the mode of instruction is forever changed. Over the months and years after the event, cities shrink. Skyscrapers, shopping malls, and office towers stand abandoned, their maintenance impossible with so few hands. Some buildings are repurposed into farms, housing, or community centers. Others are simply left, markers of a world that was. Transportation networks adjust. With less demand for travel, roads and rail lines fall into partial disuse. Survivors cluster near vital intersections, water sources, arable land, remaining industries, or migrate to climates best suited for survival. Regions once rich in human labor may become deserted, their importance fading as patterns of life are reshaped. Some rural areas see a renaissance as people look to grow their own food and escape the spectral emptiness of big cities. As humanity stabilizes, birth rates may initially fall, as communities focus on survival. But as people rebuild, some societies may encourage higher birth rates as a path to social restoration. Families are redefined, often formed from those left behind, the new chosen kin replacing old biological bonds. The environment yields more surprises. Wildlife populations surge in many places as human pressure fades, while some domesticated species suffer or go feral with no humans to care for them. Parks, lawns, and neglected fields slowly revert to meadows and forests, transforming cityscapes into landscapes of wild beauty and hazard. Over time, human ingenuity finds new ways to adapt. Technologies for automation, once sidelined by employment concerns, suddenly become vital. Robots and artificial intelligence help maintain critical infrastructure, grow food, and produce goods at a scale smaller but more reliable than the old global economy. Culturally, art, music, and storytelling take on new importance as ways to process trauma and forge identity. Artists from every background respond to the enormity of loss, expressing grief and hope in everything from murals on abandoned buildings to storytelling around campfires. Museums and libraries, once at risk, are protected as survivors recognize the need to preserve not just life but meaning. Diplomacy, too, is transformed. With so few left, former geopolitical rivalries often recede, replaced by a cautious fraternity. Old animosities look smaller next to the shared challenge of rebuilding. However, in some areas, new tensions arise over access to land, resources, and migration, as human populations resettle in more viable or desirable areas. The sciences, though decimated, become sacred endeavors. Knowledge and expertise are cherished as never before, and recoveries in medicine, engineering, and agriculture are prioritized. Global databases and archives are rebuilt, online and off, lest we lose critical information needed to support recovery and progress. Eventually, the survivor's epic challenge becomes this: how to restore good lives, not just surviving, but thriving, in a quieter, emptier world. Progress is measured not in growth, but in resilience, sustainability, and well-being. Humanity, chastened, realizes the fragility and preciousness of civilization. Generations later, children born after the event inherit a world very different from the one before. They learn the history of the cataclysm in stories told by elders and in the shape of their towns, the remnants of the old world all around. Museums and schools grow from the memory of what was lost. Some survivors romanticize the world that was, its energy, abundance, and complexity. Others see the new, quieter era as a chance to correct old mistakes, to cherish the earth, to live more closely in community, to recognize the great responsibility that comes with numbers. The natural world, revitalized by the sudden withdrawal of so many humans, blooms anew. Species thought endangered resurge. Forests creep back, rivers run clearer. In the absence of excessive industry, the planet begins a slow healing. Survivors recognize, sometimes with awe, sometimes with unease, the power of nature's resilience. Cultural memory holds the story of the loss as both warning and promise. The knowledge that humanity depends on each other, that civilization is more fragile than once imagined, and that from even the deepest tragedy, growth, learning, and life can emerge. As the world settles into its new reality, the question becomes not just, how do we rebuild, but what kind of world do we wish to rebuild? Survivors become pioneers, not merely restoring what was, but creating new societies, choosing different values, priorities, and ways of life. Imagine, then, cities rebuilt to sustainable scales, designed for resilience, community, and harmony with nature. Local agriculture replaces distant megafarms. Neighborhood councils manage resources collaboratively. Energy systems are decentralized, with solar, wind, and local grids replacing the old, sprawling infrastructures. Houses and buildings are repurposed, compact, and adapted to a leaner population. Art and tradition revive in new forms, infusing society with a sense of shared purpose and identity, drawn from both past and present. Libraries serve as community hubs, sharing not just books, but skills and knowledge. Education is practical, participatory, and focused on the tools not just to survive, but to rebuild meaningfully. In this remade world, human relationships take on deeper urgency and importance. Each friendship, partnership, and alliance is more valuable, as every person is a crucial part of their community's function and survival. Over decades, humanity slowly recovers its numbers, but perhaps never returns to its old patterns. A collective wisdom emerges, the awareness that growth without care risks repeating old mistakes, and that true prosperity lies in balance and connection. Centuries on, what would be remembered of the cataclysm that halved the human race? Monuments, stories, and traditions would mark the event as a turning point in human history, a moment when civilization was thrust into crisis and then reborn anew. New philosophies, religions, and stories would grow, some shaped by faith and resilience, others as cautionary tales about the limits of human power. And perhaps, as the rebuilt world looks up to the stars or delves down into the mysteries of science and art, the experience of loss would temper ambition with humility, drive innovation with compassion, and bind people together with a sense of shared fate. In that reality, the survivors and their descendants may find meaning not just in what was lost, but in what could be gained. A civilization rebuilt on new foundations, connected more deeply, living more lightly, and aware, always, of both the fragility and grandeur of life on this small, shared planet. Thank you for watching the video. What do you think about today's topic? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and share the video to support the channel. Thanks again, and see you in the next video.